She was just the maid until the rich cowboy came home one night and found her singing to his daughter, Texas Hill Country, late autumn, 1878. The breeze swept in from the north, keen as a knife, pulling dirt over the hills. Bo hadn't traveled this path in 2 years. He recognized every post along the fence, every curve. But this evening it seemed like a recollection from someone else's existence. The spread stretched out beneath, hushed beneath a darkened heavens. The stable drooped, the top tilted. The dwelling shone dimly, vibrant, yet hesitant, as though it didn't desire him anymore. His fingers gripped the reins tighter. The gelding, under him, navigated carefully through the sludge. He had never given this horse a name. Naming implied holding on. Bo hadn't held onto anything since the day Eliza passed away. One instant she was chuckling, poking fun at him for worrying. The following, her mount panicked and she was flung, head hitting rock, blood flowing before he could get to her. She was lost, and she left him with a tiny newborn Emily. For 3 evenings following the burial, Bo rested in the chair Eliza had picked, holding the infant. He nourished her, crooned in a fractured murmur, but each look at her features revealed Eliza. To him, her lips, her gaze, the small indentation in her chin, and each instance his heart sank under remorse. He could tame fierce mustangs, ward off thieves, manage 1,000 acres with sheer determination, but he couldn't serve as her dad, not when every inhale close to her recalled his defeat. So he handed Emily to the care of Mrs. Alden, the caretaker who had brought him up and headed west. No farewell, no justification, just quiet. For 2 years he wandered, protecting carts, resting beneath branches, swapping mounts, earning pay for solitary tasks. He forwarded funds home, scrawled notes on bits of liquor bills, but he never inquired about Emily. He lacked the fortitude to learn if she had erased him from memory. Then the note arrived. Mrs. Alden's writing remained firm, but the writing appeared hurried. Emily won't talk. She gazes at the pain. I croon to her, but it doesn't aid. Bo, she requires her dad. 12 words. They shattered the barrier within him. She requires her dad. He hadn't considered himself in that role since the burial. The phrases sliced sharper than any shot. So he directed his horse eastward. Noe positioned himself on the veranda of his own residence, the burden weighing more intensely than before. What if Emily failed to recall him? What if she did and despised him for departing? His palm lingered above the entrance. Once he'd vowed to Eliza he would forever be present for their kid. He had faltered. But this evening wasn't concerning remorse. This evening was about attempting. The entrance groaned ajar. He anticipated quiet. Instead, he caught it. A tone gentle, unrefined but cozy rising up through the beams. A lullaby. He halted. Not merely any tune. Her tune, Eliza's lullaby, the one she had composed for Emily, crooned during gales and illnesses, through extended evenings when the infant wailed till morning. It was theirs, belonging to Eliza and Emily. Nobody else. And yet another person was crooning it now. Bo's inhale hitched, his torso constricted like a cord pulled too quickly. He ascended the steps gradually, each footfall risking to give way under the heaviness within him. Candleglow danced from behind the partly ajar entrance of the nursery. The tune drifted out, delicate but constant. He eased the entrance open. Heat hit first. Then the aroma of lavender cleanser blended with wood-fire haze. And then he spotted her. A youthful lady perched in the rocker cradling Emily. The youngster slumbered with her face nestled against the lady's shoulder, one tiny hand twisted in cloth, as if grasping something holy. The lady swayed softly, Hermith still forming the closing verses of the tune. Bo paused in the entrance. Air vanished. She crooned like she intended it, like the tune had been etched from her own essence. He didn't shift. He didn't utter. He merely positioned there, a specter in his own dwelling, observing unknown person embrace his daughter and croon her into tranquility. The lullaby dissolved into quiet, and Bo stayed motionless. Not because he lacked desire to utter, but because an element within him, one he believed eternally gone, had started to quiver. Bo stayed in the entrance longer than he planned. The space was overly calm, overly cozy, perfumed lightly with lavender and pine timber. Outside, the breeze grazed the blinds like digits, hunting for something misplaced. The youthful lady cradled Emily with an innate grace, not rehearsed, but arising from affection and duration. When the final tone of the lullaby vanished, her mouth shut softly as if locking a mystery. Emily moved. The lady adjusted her limbs to clasp her nearer. Then she glanced upward. Their gazes connected. Bo at last uttered, "Where did you pick up? That tune?" Her stare didn't waver. She dropped her gaze and stated gently, "I do not know. I just sensed it." From her, perhaps it was already present. Bo advanced inside, his footwear weighty on the planks. "She murmurs it at times," the lady continued, caressing Emily's spine. "I merely trailed her cue." He examined her in quiet, then inquired, "What is your name?" "Clara. Clara May." "You labor here?" she affirmed. "Mrs. Alden accepted me last spring. I assist with the dwelling and the youngster." "The youngster?" he repeated nearly resentfully. "She possesses a name." "I know it," Clara stated. Bo gazed down at Emily, slumbering against her shoulder, a small hand entwined in Clara's locks. He didn't know what impacted him more forcefully, that another had assumed his role, or that Emily at last appeared serene. "She won't slumber unless I croon to her," Clara stated softly. "Mrs. Alden attempted, so did the chef, but Emily only calms when I am present." Bo settled on the timber box by the pane where Eliza once combed her tresses. "You're not scared of me," he stated. "I do not perceive a cause to be." "That's uncommon," he grumbled. Clara didn't grin, but she didn't recoil either. She appeared youthful, scarcely beyond 20, yet there was something seasoned in her gaze, a silent fortitude, as if grief had contacted her but never shattered her. "You're not from around here," he stated. "No, sir. I journeyed south after my spouse departed." Bo glanced up abruptly. "You're a widow?" "Yes." He didn't inquire how. The pain in her tone sufficed. "Where from?" "Arkansas." But it ceased feeling like home well before I departed, he affirmed gradually. She repositioned Emily, cautious not to rouse her. "You've been kind to her?" he inquired more softly. "I have endeavored," Clara stated. "She required someone to embrace her when the evenings were extended. I know what that feels like." Bo bent ahead, elbows on his legs, observing the lift and drop of his daughter's spine against Clara's limbs. "She used to slumber like that with her mom," he whispered, curled up like a kitten. "Always required warmth." "She still does," Clara murmured, his neck constricted. He examined her. The plain plait, the mended gown, the firmness of her palms. She wasn't merely employed aid. She had eased into Emily's soul while he had been absent. And for the initial time, Bo experienced shame, not toward Clara, toward himself, for abandoning a gap broad enough for another lady to occupy. "I should not be present," he stated abruptly, standing. Before he could depart, Clara's tone halted him, not boisterous, but assured. "She requires you, Mr. Mallister. Regardless how much I croon, it will never match." He pivoted, jaw firm. "And what about you?" "I do not anticipate anything," she stated plainly. "I am just thankful to be somewhere cozy." Her tone bore no sharpness, no appeal, only truth, like someone who had ceased requesting life for more than endurance. Hepperted his lips to utter, but Emily shifted. Clara stood, moving the youngster with skilled grace, and placed her softly on the mattress. She drew the blanket to her chin, smoothing her locks. Emily exhaled in her slumber. Clara retreated, then gazed at Beau. He couldn't decipher her look, but something in it lingered with him, even after she glided by him into the corridor. He was solitary once more, but the space no longer seemed vacant. The kitchen was oddly silent. That dawn. The atmosphere carried the crisp sting of winter's initial alert. A fine layer of ice adhered to the window glasses. Inside, the heat from the oven did little to melt the strain. Mrs. Alden, positioned at the end of the lengthy table, her palms clasped over her smock, her lips firm. The handful of household workers who stayed, a chef, a barn lad, and a servant in learning, positioned close, dodging her stare. Clara was rinsing dishes at the basin when she caught the voice, sharp and curt. "Clara May," Mrs. Alden stated. "Approach here, please." Clara placed the dish down cautiously. Her palms were firm, her shoulders aligned. She neared. "Yes, ma'am." As one individual noticed the item, she unfurled her hand. A golden timepiece rested in it, shining in the blaze glow. Aged shined Beau's dad's timepiece. "I discovered this under the cloths in your compartment," Mrs. Alden stated. Clara fluttered her eyes. "I do not. I wasn't inquiring," the elder lady interrupted. "I was declaring." The space iced. Even the flames in the fireplace appeared to halt. Clara's lips parted, then sealed again. "I've protected that timepiece for years," Mrs. Alden proceeded, her tone elevating a bit. "It was intended for Mr. Beau's daughter someday, a family treasure, and now it turns up hidden in your chamber." "I never contacted it," Clara stated quietly. Yet there it is. The other workers remained quiet, eyes on the ground. No one stirred. No one uttered in her support. Clara breathed in gradually. "I do not pilfer." Mrs. Alden's face hardened. "You arrived? Here with naught, Ms. May. I provided you shelter, food, and the faith of a mourning youngster. I did not provide you this." Before Clara could respond, the rear entrance swung open. Beau entered, mittens in grasp, footwear still moist with morning mist. He glanced among them, observing the quietness, the gazes lowered, the heaviness in the space. "What's happening?" he inquired. Mrs. Alden pivoted to him like a lady offering proof in tribunal. "Mr. Mallister, we've uncovered your dad's timepiece in Miss May's area. She asserts blamelessness." Beau looked at Clara. She stood erect, her palms folded before her, chin raised. No weeping, no dread, just something determined, dignified. Beau gazed at the timepiece, then at Mrs. Alden, then back to Clara. The atmosphere extended slender. "At last," he uttered. "If she required a timepiece," he stated gradually, "I'd provide her 10, a shocked quiet." Beau advanced, claimed the timepiece from Mrs. Alden's grasp, flipped it once, and set it on the shelf. "But I don't think she did," he appended, "because Clara May doesn't seem to me as someone who grabs what isn't hers." Mrs. Alden's mouth separated, a little. "Mr. Beau, that's sufficient," he stated. Not harsh, but resolute, conclusive. The others scattered quietly, making themselves disappear. Clara did not move. Beau looked at her again for the first time, truly seeing her, and she looked shaken, not because she was accused, but because he had defended her. Emily came toddling, in just then, rubbing her eyes, hair tousled from sleep. She saw Clara and ran straight to her, wrapping her small arms around her legs. Clara knelt down instinctively, her hand resting on the child's back. Emily looked up, then reached a small hand toward B. He took it gently. For armament, the three of them stood there, the accused, the accuser, and the child in between, and it felt strangely like balance. Beau cleared his throat. "Well, speak later," he said to Mrs. Alden. Then, quieter to Clara, "Come with him." Clara followed him without a word. Emily still holding her hand. But something had shifted in the silence they left behind. Clara's eyes, usually soft, now held something else. Not anger, not even relief, just a quiet awe, like for the first time in a long while, someone had believed her. The storm came fast. By midday, the sky was the color of slate, and the wind had a sound like something crying across the fields. Rain fell in hard, slanted sheets. Thunder rolled like distant cannon fire, shaking the ground beneath the house. Beau had seen plenty of storms, but this one felt different. He stood on the porch, hat pulled low, coat soaked through, eyes fixed on the horizon. The creek had already breached its bank. Water snaked through the corral. The wind tore shingles from the barn roof. Inside, staff scrambled to close shutters, save feed, move what animals they could. Then came the scream. A sharp, high cry full of panic. "Emila!" someone shouted from the kitchen. Beau's heart stopped. He was off the porch in an instant, boots hitting mud, water up to his shins as he ran through the yard. "Where is she?" he barked. She was in the back with Clara. "Then she ran," the maid shouted, pointing toward the pasture. "We cannot find her." Beau didn't wait. He ran toward the back fields, eyes scanning wildly. Rain blurred his vision. The wind howled like it was trying to drag the world apart. Then he saw Clara. She was already in the flood. The water came up to her waist as she fought her way toward the old storage barn, the one Beau had meant to tear down last year. Its door was barely holding, swinging in the wind, half submerged in rushing water. "Clara!" he shouted. She didn't turn, didn't hesitate. Slushy tove, Beau's blood turned to ice. He lunged forward, heart pounding, boots sliding on the slick earth as he waded into the current. The water pulled at his legs like hands, cold and merciless. He gritted his teeth, pushing forward. The barn groaned as if about to collapse. He got to the door just as Clara emerged. She was soaked, hair plastered to her face, arms cradling something tight. Emily. The girl clung to Clara's chest, coughing, face pale, but alive. Clara held her like she'd never let go. Beau reached for them, both pulling them free of the current back toward the house. He wrapped one arm around Clara's waist, the other shielding Emily. They stumbled together through the rising water, back to the porch, gasping for breath. Inside, the fire crackled warm against the storm's roar. Beau carried Emily in and set her, near the hearth where blankets waited. Clara stood shivering, soaked to the bone. Mud caked up her skirt, arms trembling from holding Emily so tightly for so long. She tried to step back. Beau caught her wrist. She flinched, but he only said gently, "Sit." Without a word, he took one of the dry cloths from the hearth basket and knelt beside her. He began to dry her arms carefully, his fingers rough but slow. Then her hands red and scraped from broken wood. He wrapped them, not looking at her. Neither spoke. Rain pounded the windows. The house, for the first time in a long time, felt alive again. Clara's breathing steadied, her hands stopped shaking. Beau kept working, his jaw tight, eyes focused on each movement. Not out of duty, but because she had gone into that water for his child. She had not waited, had not called for help. She had simply gone, risked herself, saved Emily, and now she sat here, soaked, freezing, silent, like it was nothing, like it was expected. He finished tying the last strip of cloth around her palm. Only then did he glance up. Her eyes met his. No words passed between them. None were needed. Outside, the storm howled on, but inside, by the fire, something fragile had been lit. Something neither of them dared name. Not yet. The rain had passed by morning. The world outside the ranch was quiet again, save for the soft dripping of water from the eaves and the occasional groan of wood drying in the sun. Inside, the house smelled of damp wool and smoke. The floodwaters had spared the main living quarters, but the barns would need work. A dozen things waited to be fixed. But Bo wasn't thinking about the barn. He was thinking about Clara. She was in the small back room beside the kitchen, wrapping herbs into pouches for drying. Her sleeves were rolled up, revealing the red marks, still fading from her wrists. She moved slowly, but her hands were steady again. Bo stepped inside, leaning against the doorway. Clara looked up. Neither spoke for a moment. Finally, Bo said, "You should be in bed." "I needed something to do," she replied softly. He walked in, pulled a chair out, and sat across from her. He watched her for a moment, then asked, "Why?" She paused. "Why did you run into that barn?" he said. "You could have died. The whole damn thing was coming down." Clara lowered her gaze, her fingers stilled. "She's not yours," Bo said. "You know that." Clara's voice came low. "I know. So why?" She looked up then, and her eyes were already wet. "I do not know how to explain it," she whispered. "I saw the water, heard her crying, and something inside me just moved." Bo leaned forward. People don't risk their lives for no reason. Clara stared. At the herbs in her hands, silent. Then the tears came. Not sudden, not loud, but slow and arching. She spoke without looking at him. "My father owned a ranch, not as big as this one, but enough. Cattle, a few dozen acres, good men under him. He was strict, proud, but kind. People came to him when they were in trouble." She swallowed hard. "When the war came, things changed. Men went off. Neighbors turned on neighbors. He stayed neutral or tried to, but he found 2 Union prisoners hiding near the creek. They were young. One was barely 16. She wiped her cheek. He gave them food, water, told them which road to take to avoid patrols. Someone saw her voice cracked. They arrested him. 2 days later, lined him up with deserters and thieves, shot him in front of the house. B sat still, not breathing. Clara's fingers twisted the cloth in her lap. "I was 17. I watched from the barn loft. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. My mother fainted. My little brother. He never spoke again." Bo whispered, "I'm sorry." Clara looked at him then. "Really?" "Looked. That would have been enough to break me," she said. But it wasn't the end. She drew a slow breath. "Home of those soldiers. The officer in charge. I'd met him before at the market. He smiled like he didn't belong in war. Talked of books, not bullets. I was young, foolish. I thought he saw something in me." She closed her eyes. "I never imagined he'd be the one to give the order." Bo felt something cold settle in his chest. "Afterwards, he wrote me a letter. Said he was sorry. Said he didn't know it was my father. That it was war. That he had no choice. Shallowed, bitter, and small. I burned it." Silence stretched between them. Then Clara said, "A year later, I married a schoolteacher. Kind man, sickly, headied during the fever outbreak in Fort Smith." Bo exhaled. "You've lost a lot." She nodded. "I have nothing left," she said. "No name that matters, no family that writes. I sing sometimes to remember I still exist." She looked toward the window. "But Emily, she's the first thing in a long time that made me want to sing again." B's throat tightened. "She listens," Clara added, "even when no one else does." He stared at her, trying to find words, but none came. Clara blinked the tears from her eyes, squared her shoulders, and went back to tying the herbs. The conversation was over, but the wound and the bond remained. The sun broke through the clouds for the first time in 3 days. B stood on the front porch with a letter in hand, its paper thin and yellowed at the edges, the handwriting neat but old-fashioned. The envelope had come by horseback from El Paso, delivered by a crier who said only for Bo Mallister, from a Mrs. Judith Lane. He had not heard that name in years. Judith Lane had once been a friend of his mother's back when they were girls together in Tennessee. Bo barely remembered her face, only that she smelled of orange peels and read poetry aloud at the parlor gatherings. He opened the letter carefully. The words inside changed everything. Dear B, if this reaches you, then perhaps you've already come to know the girl with the quiet voice and the wounded heart. Her name is Clara May, but I imagine she never told you the rest. She is Henry May's daughter. Yes, the same Henry May who once loaned your father the horses that kept Mallister Ranch from going under during the drought of '62. The same man who refused repayment, saying, "One neighbor's harvest is another man's survival." I raised Clara after the war. Her mother died of sorrow. Her brother was never right again. When Clara fell in love with a Union officer, Henry disowned her, banished her, told the town she was dead to him, and she never came back to ask for a thing. She could have claimed land, inheritance, even protection. But she chose silence. She chose pride. If she is in your house, Bo, then you ought to know she is not just a maid. She is the daughter of the man who saved your family, and she has suffered quietly for far too long. Do what is right. Not for pity. For justice. Bo stood there reading the letter twice, then a third time. His chest ached, not just with the weight of truth, but with shame. How long had she been under his roof, sweeping floors, folding linens, singing lullabies? And he had not seen her? Not really. She could have flaunted her name, demanded better, but she hadn't. She'd lived humbly, worked honestly, protected his child without asking for anything in return, and Noon knew because she hadn't let them. He looked up from the letter through the kitchen window. Inside, Clara was sitting at the table with Emily, showing her how to thread a needle through cloth. The child laughed, a soft, high sound. Bo hadn't heard in a long time. Clara smiled, gently correcting her hand. No airs, no pride, just care. He stepped inside. The floorboards creaked under his boots. Clara looked up, startled. Emily waved. "Look, what he made?" Emily beamed, holding up a crooked square of embroidery. Bo nodded, eyes fixed on Clara. "You're Henry May's daughter," he said. She froze. The smile fell from her face. Bo held up the letter. "I got word from Judith Lane." Clara's mouth parted slightly, but she said nothing. "I know what happened, Boded. I know about your father, about the officer, about everything." Clara set the cloth down. Her hands were trembling. "I never meant to hide it," she said quietly. I didn't want to be treated different or pied, or her voice trailed off. I didn't want anyone to say I only got this job because of my name, or worse, because Ion's helped yours. You didn't get it because of that." She looked up at him, uncertain. B's voice was rough now. "You've been here for nearly 2 years, living in silence, working harder than anyone. And not one person in this damned house knew you were the daughter of the man who kept this place alive when my father was too proud to beg." Clara didn't answer. Emily reached for her hand, holding it. Bo stepped closer. "To Moon," he said, "took in my daughter when I couldn't look at her, nursed her, loved her, risked her life to save her." He looked her straight in the eyes, and it was the daughter of a man this town forgot. Silence stretched between them. Bo shook his head slowly. "A woman like you living like this for years, and no one knew, no one asked. I'm ashamed, not of you, of this land, of what it forgets." Clara blinked hard. Bo didn't say more. He turned and walked outside again, the letter still in his hand. Boot as he went, Emily laid her embroidery down, slipped off the chair, and crawled into Clara's lap. Clara held her tightly, not as a servant, not as a guest, but as someone who had earned her place, without a name, and finally now, with one, the wind carried more than dust that week. It carried whispers. They crept in through the post office, behind church pews, under the shelves at the mercantile, spoken by women with tight smiles and men with knowing nods, stories born from silence and jealousy, the most dangerous kind. The maid, Clara May, they say she's got her claws in the Mallister. Fortune living under his roof. You know what that means? A young widow with no family? Of course she'd seduce him. The source, Mrs. Alden. She never named names, never said anything outright, just tilted her head, wrung her hands, looked away with a sigh, and that was enough. By the end of the week, the town had decided. Clara May was not a maid. She was a trap. Clara heard it from a stable boy, too young to lie well, his eyes full of guilt, his voice hushed. She didn't cry. She didn't defend herself. She just packed. She folded each of Emily's dresses, the ones she'd sewn and mended. She wrapped the embroidery she and the child had stitched together in plain cloth. She left behind the shoes Mrs. Alden gave her. She placed everything she owned in a single satchel. In the corner of the room sat the wooden chair Beau had repaired after the flood, the one Emily liked to rock in. Clara paused, then turned away. She walked downstairs quietly. No goodbyes, no scenes. But Emily saw her. The child came running from the kitchen, flowers still on her hands, a ribbon half tied in her hair. "Where are you going?" she asked. Clara knelt. Her smile wavered, but she steadied it. "Somewhere new, sweetheart." Emily's eyes widened, her lip quivered. But you're mine." Clara's throat closed. "He will always be yours," she whispered. Emily flung her arms around her neck. "Don't go, Mama!" she cried. "Please don't go!" The word hit Clara like a shot. No one had ever called her that. Not even the child she lost too soon. Her arms tightened around Emily. She had no answer. Then the door swung open. Beau stood in the threshold. He wore his best shirt, wrinkled, half-buttoned, clearly pulled from the bottom of a forgotten drawer. In one hand, he held a ring of wild flowers, hastily woven, uneven, sun-dried. His eyes were steady. Clara rose slowly, Emily still in her arms. Beau took a step forward. "I heard," he said, "about the talk, about the lies." Clara opened her mouth, but he raised a hand. "I do not care." She shook her head. "I cannot stay where I am not wanted." "You are wanted, not by this town. I don't give a damn about the town." She looked down. "I never asked for anything." "I know. You don't owe me. I know that too." Hess stepped closer. "You once told me you had nothing left," he said, voice low. "That all you had was your voice." She nodded barely. "He held out the flowers, but you gave it back to us. To me, to her." Clara's eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. Bio's voice softened. "Emily chose you, and I do too. So if you have one more song in you, let it be this one." He held the wildflower ring between them. "Sing it as my wife." Emily sniffled and pressed her face into Clara's neck. Clara stood frozen between fear and hope, between exile and home. Then she took the flowers. Her hand brushed his. It was enough. The grass was still damp with morning dew, but the sun had finally returned to the hills. They didn't tell the town. There were no invitations, no preacher, no rings, just a field. Behind the orchard, the breeze rustling through wild sage, and the child who had brought them both back to life. Barefoot and laughing, scattering petals from a little tin bucket. Clara wore a dress she had mended 100 times. Beau wore the only clean shirt he owned, but neither looked out of place beneath the endless sky. They stood facing each other beneath the open blue, the silence between them full of everything that had ever been said and everything that did not need saying. Emily circled them, her hair wild in the wind, her joy unburdened by any memory of pain. Clara took Beau's hands. Her voice, soft as a breeze, rose into the air. It wasn't the old lullaby. It wasn't the one Eliza sung. It was new, something Clara had made just for this day, for this life. A song not of mourning, but of mending, of home, of beginnings. Bayo didn't look away, not when her voice cracked, not when his own eyes filled. He stood there and listened. He listened the way only a man who had once lost everything could, with reverence, with ache, with gratitude. When the final note faded, Clara looked at him. Bob stepped forward. He wrapped his arms around her, not like a man claiming something, but like a man finally safe. Emily squeezed between them, her arms wrapping around both legs. They stayed like that for a long while. 3 souls. Hewn promise. No vows had been spoken, but something ancient had been kept. Later, as the sun dipped low, Bo built a small fire. They sat beside it, husband, wife, and daughter, watching the flames dance in silence. Behind them, the prairie stretched out for miles. Around them, the air smelled of pine and smoke, and above them, the stars began to come out one by one like witnesses. There had been war. There had been loss. But in this quiet corner of a dusty world, they had found what others spent lifetimes chasing. Not wealth, not glory, just each other. And a place where a song once meant to ease sorrow could finally sing of something else. Out here on the edge of the world, where storms rise fast and hearts heal slow. Some love stories are not written in ink, but in silence, sacrifice, and song. Clara and Bo did not find perfection. They found truth. A life mended by loss, carried by grace, and made whole by a child who called love home again. If this story touched you, subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales of forgotten hearts, fearless women, and the kind of love that doesn't just survive, it sings, where bullets missed, but hearts didn't.